What's up, guys? Stephen Bogrund here from Physique. Today, what I wanted to talk a little bit about is your training programming. So, alright guys, let's talk about some training programming stuff today because I got a question about it. I had already had it on my list of things to talk about, and I thought it was a good topic to just sort of go over. And I think it's definitely one of those things that people get into the habit of getting into all the bells and whistles and the hibbity-hobbity doodads and overcomplicating things quite a bit. So let's sort of talk about the main things that we want to address in terms of training. So volume, intensity, frequency, and then of course, the type of exercise that you're doing. So type of exercise, if you're a power lifter, we want to be focusing on powerlifting, right? If you're a bodybuilder, we want to focus on bodybuilding. So there is a little bit of carryover in between the two, but for the most part, if you're a bodybuilder, you're not worried about squatting 500 pounds. If you're a power lifter, you're not worried about how big your medial delta is, because it doesn't matter to your specific situation. So the first thing that we want to recognize is paying attention to our specific sport. So now I'm not saying that there is no benefit to doing some lower rep work, things below 8 reps for a bodybuilder. In fact, I believe quite the opposite. I believe that bodybuilders should be doing lower rep work. Same is said for powerlifters. There is no reason why we shouldn't be doing sets of 10 on certain exercises. But it all needs to be within our sport-specific plan for what we're doing, right? So let's sort of talk about the bells and whistles, right? All the special stuff, because we see a lot of that stuff now, the chains, the bands, the West Side style programming, and I'm a fan of the West Side style programming. I like the idea of using chains. I like pause reps. I like banded work. It can all be very beneficial. Understand, again, is it going to be beneficial to you? I don't believe bodybuilders need to be doing a lot of banded work, okay? Now, say that maybe a bodybuilder is having issues with their back positioning during a deadlift. So at that point, something like a paused deadlift or a paused trap bar deadlift might be beneficial because it will teach them to keep their posture proper during the deadlift, and it will help them to stay injury-free. This is a great example of when to start using some of the bells and whistles in your programming. Some things that are a little bit more outside of that normal traditional box of exercise and resistance training, okay? When we're talking about injury prevention, that should always be our number one. So addressing weaknesses or addressing issues with form are going to be very important to do. Being able to understand if you have a valgus collapse, right, that we need to be able to better activate and better utilize the abductors during our squat is important, right? We want to make sure that our knees are staying where they need to stay, because as soon as they come in, we're risking injury, okay? So we also want to make sure that our bracing is good enough, right? Obviously, we want to make sure the spine is nice and safe and secure. We don't ever want to risk spinal injury unnecessarily. So let's talk a little bit about the next point that I want to make, is how often should we be switching things up? So one of the things that I get is, I want to switch things up a little bit more. I did a different exercise. I was very sore. And so we'll get to the soreness thing next, but here's what I want to address. When we switch up exercises, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing either. So for our main lifts, our main exercises, we want to make sure that we're consistent on those throughout the block, because we want to be consistent with our volume progression. We want to be consistent with our undulation, our changes in intensity, and our changes in rep schemes and stuff. And we want to be accountable to that so that we can make sure we're still making the correct progress. Once we start changing that up on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, we're now changing the neuromuscular pattern that's happening. And so we're getting a different stimulus, okay? So it's not necessarily bad to get a different stimulus, but we want to make sure that we are accountable to the main thing that we're trying to do, which is, progress volume or increase intensity or whatever it might be, right? So switching out our main movements on a regular basis is not necessarily a very good idea in the long term when it comes to putting on quality muscle. What about accessory exercises and accessory movements? Now, this is a different situation altogether, because how much of a difference is there between a face pull and a rear delt fly, right? So it's not a huge difference. The biggest differences are going to be, the cable versus a free weight or versus a machine. I'm not so sold that it's going to make a huge difference if you say, I want to go to use the machine to do my rear delt flies, or I want to go use the dumbbells to do them, right? Or I want to use a band to do them. So same with cables. It's a little bit different on how they're going to work, but the main thing should be is one, that you're enjoying the exercises, right? Because enjoying the exercises means you're going to be adherent, means you're going to keep doing them. But two, that you're being, again, safe during the exercises, right? So if you feel more comfortable doing rear delt flies on a pec deck machine than you do with dumbbells, do them on the pec deck machine. If, say, you have rear delt flies and you don't feel like doing the dumbbells today, or your back's a little bit sore, you're having issues with holding position, go do them on the pec deck machine, or go do them on a cable, you know what I mean? Like, do the things that you need to do, because that's a simple substitution that you can make to change up that one day that's not going to make a giant influence, okay? And so I think here's the last one I want to go over today, and it's going to be the big one. It's the soreness thing. Oh, man, the soreness. So when we talk about muscular soreness, there's a couple reasons why we can be getting really sore. It can be that we're overreached, right? We need a deload and a back off time. And it's time to sort of take a break and take a step back on our training, give our body some time to recover, rest up, and recuperate from the training that we've been doing. Two is newer movements, right? So when we have a newer movement going on, it's a new neuromuscular pattern. So our body is having a difficult time, or it's still learning to do that pattern correctly and efficiently, which means that the muscles it's recruiting aren't going to be the muscles that it continues to recruit in another 3 or 4 weeks. It's going to get better, it's going to get more efficient, right? So instead of recruiting smaller muscles fibers first, it's going to start recruiting larger muscle fibers first. And so the reasons that we can see such soreness when we switch up exercises on a regular basis like that is because our body neuromuscularly has not adapted to that. It hasn't become very efficient at it, and it's recruiting smaller muscle fibers first, which are having to do more work, and then therefore being sustaining more muscular damage, okay? So soreness as an indicator of muscle growth. Now that is another thing that we want to talk about, because soreness is not the best indicator of muscle growth. We do not have to be overly sore all the time to be getting stronger, to be getting bigger, to be getting better, okay? In fact, if we're super sore all the time, it normally tells us one of two things. Again, one, that we're overreached, or two, that our nutrition or our recovery methods are not sufficient for the training that we're doing, right? So things that can cause us to be extra sore: poor nutrition, poor sleep, excessive stress in life, right? These are all things that we can see that come up that are going to happen in our lives when soreness is increasing. So the main take-home points today are: make sure that you are accountable to your main lifts, right? Be accountable, have something there that you can progress properly. The second one, make sure you're staying safe. We don't want to switch it up on our main lifts because we need to be accountable for that, for proper programming. But on your accessory movements, there are definitely some substitutions you can make within the workout that are going to help you be more successful in terms of enjoying it and staying safe. And the third one, and this is probably my big one right now, is muscle soreness is not necessarily a good indicator of muscle growth. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. I hope you all have a wonderful Monday. I hope that this week is full of joy and it brings great things for you. But that's all I've got, so I will talk to you soon.